There were a lot of elephants in the room at the end of the Legacy line, from a questionable take on action figures, to a frustrating take on Zords, to the seemingly unfocused and cost-reducing direction the line was headed in. It was hard to see the bright spots at the time, though there were a few more bucket list items we got to tick off, even if I didn't get all the ones I wanted. So, as the end to the overall line, what shape did Bandai leave us in? Let's talk about the end of the line for Power Rangers Legacy. The final years of Legacy 2017 and 2018 started as usual with yet more money-making Mighty Morphin, but the releases were a bit different this time, not least in terms of box artwork, which would follow the darker design introduced by the Red Ranger helmet. Bandai would hit us with a surprise release in March 2017, the Power Coins. Just the Power Coins. After 7 Power Morpher releases, including the Convention Tommy exclusive one, Bandai must have figured that most of us already had 1 or 2 of these at home. But what we didn't have were golden versions of the Dino coins. We only had the weathered ones, and some of us had the metallic gold versions of T-Rex, Triceratops and Pterodactyl from those movie morphers that they abandoned. So here was a third version colour, almost like a chocolate coin wrapper gold. Not my favourite, but priced quite fairly. I went for it. I like the idea of being able to represent the coins a bit more screen accurately. Though if I'm honest, I'd rather they just stuck to the nicer gold that they did with those movie morpher coins. Unlike the weathered versions, it's harder to make out the dinosaur insignia here, but it's a nice set. A shame we didn't get Tommy's coins to match them. And after stalling us for what felt like forever, Bandai proved they could listen in July 2017 as they gave us the Ninetti coins, our final product in the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie packaging, which featured Rocky's Red Ranger helmet variant, which really contrasts to the Jason helmet on the previous TV series coin set quite nicely. These were yet again weathered, just like the original Power Morpher coins. Those of you keeping track would realise that despite all the morphers and coin releases, there was still never a fully matching set. I recently bought a third-party Starlight Studios weathered Falcon coin because it was the easiest path to get a set of all 13 matching coins. I guess that truly is an unlucky number. There was also a never-released Amazon listing for a Super Zeo gem set in January 2018, which stated would be compatible with the Power Morpher, and fans speculated that it would follow the Super Zeo gem design briefly glimpsed on screen in one episode when Trey of Triforia gave them to the Rangers to unlock their Super Zeo Zords. They would have already filmed the Dimensions in Danger 25th anniversary special episode at this point, where Tommy obviously uses a red bejeweled Zeo power coin. So in retrospect, I think we all speculate that these coins could have been based on those. And again, third parties have picked up the slack on this in the subsequent years. Yep, Bandai had Zeo on the brain for the Legacy line, with the 2017 movie hopefully picking up the slack for people's dino enthusiasm. They announced their intention to finally introduce another season to the Legacy line in July 2017 at San Diego Comic-Con with the limited gold Communicator. Doesn't look like Bandai have ever really shared exactly how many of these they produced, but I expect it wasn't many compared to the mass-produced versions and how much they often sell for on the aftermarket. Yeah, I'm still hoping to get one day, okay. Jason Whiplash would continue the next month, going back to his Red Ranger form as the final significant Mighty Morphin weapon, not to get a release, finally would. A full-size Power Sword came in August 2017 after getting announced in March. $150 would finally give you an upgrade to the paltry butter knife rubber version from the original 90s Power Blaster set. Bigger than any of the previous Legacy Power weapons, the box was an unwieldy thing with no window anymore showing you what was inside. The sword was nice. It was heavy, though noticeably less diecast was used than the 3 previous weapons. There were the usual sound effects and theme tune you would expect though. Red Ranger owned the moment in the fall as the second Legacy helmet would be based on the Red Movie Ranger. No, sadly, not Movie Rocky, which I would have bought. This was Jason 2.0. The 2017 movie made a few appearances in the Legacy line, which I think was a clever move by Bandai that they were prepared for from the off, with higher quality products for the older collector's market. A shame then that the designs chosen for the movie were just so uninspiring. I don't know how best to describe it. You know I love me some sketchy designs a la 1995, but 2017 just never did it for me. From the suits that seemed to lack personality and helmets that were just too similar. The helmet sculpt as a toy admittedly looks really solid and was probably more accurate to the film than the 2 series helmets Bandai released were to the show. But it was still an easy pass for me. I didn't love any of those designs in the first place. That's one large item to bring into your immediate orbit. If you're lukewarm on, good luck convincing people to do so. The very next month saw another movie legacy product released, the Light Up Power Coin set in October 2017. Bandai were really hoping for some holiday sales shopping from the movie, weren't they? With this, you got the 5 main ranges new alien powered discs, pancakes, which, as a legacy roleplay hallmark, were presented in 1:1 scale as we saw in the movie. This time in a special presentation case, a new one for the legacy line, that lit up, illuminating the dinosaurs within. It was effectively a much better version of the effect used in the kids' toy morpher. But to me, yet again a very easy pass. I was not a fan of what they did to the power coins in the movie. Sorry, Bandai. I can tell this is a nice set. If you'd given us a Ninetti tribal symbol, great power, light up monolith, I'd have snapped it up. The movie flopping was a seismic moment for the franchise, which unfortunately led to a domino effect of events that would spell out the next phase of the Power Rangers chronology. Bandai weren't hitting the mark. Unfortunately, they struggled in 2017 under the weight of 3 simultaneous toy lines. And so Saban Brands were able to, in February 2018, announce that they had partnered with Hasbro as the new master toy licensee. It meant that the remaining months of the year would belong to Bandai, shipping out and selling that which was still in development, but come 2019, it was Hasbro's toy line. The momentum shift was significant. It really felt like we were losing a piece of childhood somehow. Yeah, I didn't have a great year with Bandai in 2017, but should one bad season cost you the sport entirely? We can debate the consequences and ramifications of this decision ad nauseum, but you can't deny that we would be in a very different arena for the franchise right now if Bandai was still running the toy line. I'll formulate some thoughts on that and put it in a future video. But now the context had shifted. Yes, Bandai were continuing to release product throughout 2018, but we knew it was last chance saloon to get stuff. They started their final year by going back to helmets for one more time. Following the release of 2 Reds, finally came another Mighty Morphin series release in the Green Ranger helmet in March 2018. And this was surely one of the most anticipated. Tommy Anything had always proven to be a big seller. Plus they'd basically done all the Green Ranger stuff they could do already. So yes, the helmet was fine, but it was very squeezed width-wise. Look at it beside the Legacy Red helmet. It was like they'd heard the criticism of the Red Ranger helmet being too big and had overcompensated across one axis, but not the other. As spring continued, it was a Zeo world and we were just living in it. After the lukewarm reception to the Power Rangers movie, it was nice to get a new feature series under the Legacy line banner, and products that once again showed that Bandai knew what they were doing in this arena. It was interesting that both Zeomorphin devices came together at the same time. I suppose one was a roleplay weapon and one was a wrist-worn thing, and Bandai didn't know how either of them would perform. And they were on the clock for getting their investment back. Not helped, of course, by it being the same month that the news that Toysrus, who had up until that point been the primary retailer stockist of the Legacy line, would close all stores in the US and UK. Nearly 1,000 locations where you could buy Power Rangers toys would vanish within 6 weeks. It was a bad time to be releasing new toys. And yet, the Zeonizer, fairly one-to-one with the original toy, and proved that Bandai's 90s efforts were fairly accurate sometimes, even back then. A rarity really from the old toy line. The new version looked incredibly similar on the surface, but the advancement came from the electronics, which featured sound-alike actors doing each main Ranger's morphin call, complete with a different colour LED flash into the crystal. And they finally swapped out the Mighty Morphin theme tune to the new Zeo one. This was a nice product, and the box, like the Communicators before it, felt very premium. it kind of opened like an Apple product. It also represented yet another packaging design shift, going into this more monochrome look with a foiled Power Rangers logo. I think there were two ways of looking at the new style boxes. They either weren't sure Zeo as a name was important or appealing enough, so completely de-accentuated its prominence on the box. The other way is that Power Rangers is the big brand name. Lead with that, and it opens up a new anthology approach where you can be releasing anything from any season at any time without having to redesign the packaging. The same month saw the final Legacy Power Weapon, Jason's Golden Power Staff. This was nice. Something I'd never had as a kid and always wanted was the tiny 90s version. Now here was a 1-to-1 scale show version with a die-cast metal sliding part, plus the iconic opening piece. It featured not one, but two themes, including Go Gold Ranger Go. This was a great way for the roleplay line to conclude. It was a beauty. I'm so glad to own it. It looks fantastic with all the other weapons. Jason really got two bangers of weapons, didn't he? And they both came in the final couple years of the Legacy line. Technically, there was one final Zeo roleplay product on Bandai's farewell tour, the SDCC Gold Zeonizer, which followed in July 2018. I'm still hoping to find an affordably priced one of these one day, effectively a nice to have, as it was more based on the toy releases from the 90s. Jason never morphs using a Zeonizer in the show. It's still a cool idea though, and a good adaptation of the Zeonizer base mold. Roleplay had been one of Bandai's strong points in the Legacy line. Who would have thought we ever would have got such huge versions of Power Ranger weapons done with such care and attention to detail? I think these releases were often their best work, freest of controversy or error, and hold up as the best statement pieces of that era. Okay, there's no natural place to put this, so I'm just gonna quickly add 4 mini-scale helmets were released in March and September 2018, red and white, then green and black. Sort of like the initial Legacy Mask collection, I guess these were intended as desk novelty items. I have nothing further to add about these. Zords, though, were sadly lacking from the end of Power Rangers Legacy. After 7 unique releases, we technically got 3 more in the black and gold repaints of the original Ultrazord trio, culminating with black and gold Titanus in August 2017, allowing people to have a varying colour Ultrazord for the first time. This took 3 years to complete, though, actually more spread out than the original Legacy Ultrazord. Black and gold Megazord was first available in July 2015, post Tigerzord around the time Thunder Megazord had been showcased at SDCC, but obviously wouldn't be available for many more months. Black and Gold Dragonzord followed exactly a year later in July 2016, now post Thunder and Falcon, and finally Black and Gold Titanus completed the set in July 2017, nearly a year after the last unique Zord, the Ninja Megazord, and this was the only 2017 Legacy Zord release and the final one of the line. They may have timed this expensive release to capitalise on the attention following the 2017 movie. Also happening at the same time was that Bandai and Tamashii Nations had released their first Soul of Chogokin collaboration Megazord, the first of 3 releases that would recreate the Ultrazord again. Legacy was getting ignored and all went very quiet on us getting anything new from Bandai America. They had given us 19 individual Zords. They had skipped Tor, but I think generally we understood that. It didn't really fit the bill of something that they could add articulation or humanoid proportions to. It was just a giant turtle shell. And that second season Ultrazord was a strange one because it would reduce one release back into its separate Zord components and completely obscure the other from view. So if we're being honest, with no combining parts and the scale of the Legacy line being comparable with the originals, you could use the existing 90s Tor and get away with it as a Thunder Ultrazord stand-in. Season 2 was in the rear view, but we wanted Shogun. Falcon Zord's lifting wing connector flaps had basically hinted at us to expect Shogun, and yet 2017 and then 2018 came and went and it just didn't happen. An interview suggested it was on a piece of paper somewhere to de-escalate speculation of how far along the design process they surely must be with it. Basically, they acknowledged that it was on the list, but it wasn't being actively moved on. Bandai were just not investing in any new Legacy Zord releases, coupled with the failure of the 2017 movie Zords and the Lionfire Fortress from the Super Ninja Steel line, and the collapse of Toysrus, making any potential host venue for high item price toys not clear. It all became just too risky. Of course, Bandai hadn't turned their backs on Zords completely. After their gradual annual releases of the Black and Gold, they introduced a new category, which I have to say was pretty misguided. Released at the start of 2018, crucially just a month before the announcement that Hasbro would take over as the new Master Toy license holder, the Legacy Zords was a partial set of Dinosaurs. You got the T-Rex, the Saber-Tooth Tiger, and the Mastodon. Ironic that they did yellow and black this time, when those were the two colours missed from the Legacy movie morphers. But I guess they were the most consistently sized and articulated dinosaurs compared with the Triceratops and Pterodactyl. These were larger than the Legacy versions, didn't contain any die-cast, didn't combine, but did have off-scale figures with them which could ride inside them. They seem to be Bandai's response to the Fisher-Price Zords, which were being released at the same sort of time for younger audiences, but they were under the Legacy banner. It was all so confusing and all over the place in a way that the Legacy line hadn't been before. I don't like to count these last 3 releases as part of the Zord releases because they're more akin to action figures. It was a disappointing turn of focus to something obviously designed as a cheap shelf filler banking on MMPR. You got the impression Bandai had either had their budget flattened or had lost their enthusiasm for the line. When they had been so good at impressing us with new takes on old designs, this pivot felt wrong. It was no surprise that the Dinosaurs were never completed. I certainly never felt the need to buy them. They had basically tried to monetize Zords as action figures in the cheapest way. In fact, figures were ironically one of the big elephants in the room for the downfall of Bandai. I've been avoiding it, but let's go into the Legacy Figures Mark II. Technically, should have featured during the chronology of my middle part, the peak video, but they're a whole topic on their own, and most of their releases were during the final few years, so I wanted to keep this discussion separated into this final part. They are, to me, embryonic of the end of the Legacy line, because they were never as good as we hoped they could be. The 5-inch Legacy figures had been great, but also stood out as outliers in a market that had moved to 6 inches for collectors, such as the Star Wars Black Series and Marvel Legends. The Power Ranger figures couldn't shake their similarities to the kids' mainline action heroes, and it became as much of a detriment as an advantage. They also had looser details because of the small scale, which hindered Bandai's ambitions and seemed off compared to what they were managing in the Megazord and roleplay categories. Bandai responded in such a classic Bandai way. They announced a new $20 series and scale of collector grade figures, but taller at 6.5 inch. So they wouldn't actually scale with other manufacturers, or they would tower over them, or even any of your existing Power Ranger figures. This was interesting because it was our first true anthology series that didn't stick rigidly to the season being put out in the rest of the Legacy line. Naturally, it would start again with the Mighty Morphin Moneymaker, and generally feature figures of 2 partial teams per wave, 3 waves per year. It all kicked off with a special release of Red Ranger at San Diego Comic-Con in July 2016. A special outer slipcase, plus a power sword and a saber for the eventual Builder Megazord figure. This was a good introduction to the line. Unfortunately, what came after was already a step down. These were much more greatly articulated than anything they had done previously, but the proportions sure felt strange, especially the female figures. Bandai's muscle superhero sculpt was finally starting to ring hollow with fans, as though being this tall finally enabled us to see it properly and how wrong it all was. The abs and biceps were embossed much more prominently than those 5-inch figures ever were. It all just started to seem so unnecessary when no form of live action Power Rangers were ever portrayed this way. The hands did pop off the Legacy figures. Often you didn't get anything to replace them with, and do be warned, I broke one trying to do just that. These days they detach on their own, usually when holding a weapon. The line also lent into the Build-A-Figure gimmick, popularised by, again, Marvel Legends. The Build-A-Figure gimmick meant that you could build a 7-inch Megazord for that season by buying the 5 primary Rangers for it. There were weird exceptions to this, like Ninja Storm only ever got 3 of 6 released, but that was all you needed for you to complete the Megazord, or at least the first Ninja Storm Megazord. Whereas Mighty Morphin required you to wait for Wave 3, where you would also complete the Megazord of your In Space, which had only started the previous wave in Wave 2. If they had been really evil, they could have tied the Megazord to the specific wave, so all 3 Ninja Storms and 2 Mighty Morphins got you all the pieces for your Ninja Storm Megazord, then Wave 2 could have got you your Mighty Morphin Megazord, then Wave 3 could have been all the pieces for the Astro Megazord. Naturally, they didn't do it like that, and you could, if you like, just cherry pick your favourite season's figures and still get all the Megazord pieces you needed with the corresponding correct team of Rangers. It just meant it might take you a little while to get there. Then there was the infamous signature Weaponsgate. Despite including weapons with the 5-inch Mighty Morphin figures, combinable ones no less, their new taller cousins only included plug-in holsters and holstered modes of their Blade Busters. You didn't even get the usable form of the basic sidearms, so this was a choice, and people were annoyed once they started realising they had all this new posability but no monsters in the same scale and no weapons to even start making them look a little bit different from each other. There were calls for weapon pack sets. I even got away with using the smaller weapons for a while, but Bandai would resolve it again in the most Bandai way possible, the metallic Mighty Morphin re-releases. These were the same 5 Rangers again, this time done in a metallic sheen with metallic versions of their weapons, and you could basically share these with the regular coloured Rangers. Of course they didn't combine, and still no Blade Busters of course. And frustratingly, if you wanted to complete that team, you needed to get the Tommy New York Comic Con Fighting Spirit set from November 2017. This gave you the 3 Ranger forms featured in that episode from Dino Thunder, Green and White Mighty Morphin, and Red Zeo, the first Zeo figure to make it out right before Wave 4 the very next month. They were muscular to a fault, and the decision to put the chest joints split in the centre meant suit patterns were often interrupted. An additional wave of movie figures, yeah, don't get too excited, it was the 2017 versions again, were another easy pass for me, even though you could build the Megazord in one of its only good and posable realised versions. It was also released as a convention exclusive with more paint. The girls from Waves 4 and 5 were removed from the proper retail release and basically became GameStop exclusives at a later date. It seemed like after enough pre-orders secured their release. By Wave 6 we were down to 4 figures total, White Dino Thunder and 3 Psycho Rangers. The planned Psycho females and Silver in Space figure were scrapped, so now you had 2 more teams to never complete. The line would limp to a close with 4 more figures at San Diego Comic-Con 2018. There were 2 convention exclusives in Psycho Silver and from the Boom Studios comics Psycho Green. Shortly followed at Power Morphicon in August by the most famous comic character, Lord Drakon. And finally, Armoured Red, an exclusive to GameStop, brought the line to a close in November 2018, just a month or so before Bandai had to stop selling Power Rangers. For me, the Power Rangers Legacy Collection was an easy one to skip the majority of releases. The figures were certainly the most articulated versions we'd had to that point of the Ranger teams they represented. Some teams like In Space and Ninja Storm were crying out for updates, and the Psychos had never even been done before, so created a buzz for being totally unique. But their level of compromise put me off from completing anything other than the teams that I knew that they would actually finish. Mighty Morphin and Zeo. These were 2 of only 4 completed teams in the Legacy line. The others were Dino Thunder and the 2017 movie, and only because there was no Green Ranger. I guess technically the Mighty Morphin Metallics were also completed, but involved tracking down that convention exclusive Tommy set. They never completed Ninja Storm, In Space, the Psychos. It was a weird time because Bandai pummeled down this path in much the same way that Hasbro would over the subsequent half decade with their own take on the collector figure line. and yet they couldn't get the balance quite right in terms of making the figures desirable. They also had their fair share of controversies, especially in the first half of their releases. We've spoken about the weapons already, but paint was also an issue for them, as soon as Wave 2 messing up consistency by not painting the belts for Mighty Morphin pink, blue and black. Then in Zeo from Wave 4, they chose strange orange gold plastic, derided nowhere as much as the Gold Ranger. Mine look like trash now, as the paint I applied back then to the raw plastic is wearing away and degrading, but at one point, as my Power Rangergram account attests, they looked pretty decent together, especially compared to how they first arrived. As some of you may remember, custom weapons were how I resolved the lack of weapons with the Zeo team. By the end, even the construction of the figures was in question, as Lord Draken apparently had a really loose torso. The legacy figures could have been great, but they weren't. All in all, more of an ordeal than they needed to be. While Bandai were and are still praised for their exceptionally accurate paint detail when they did paint something the right colour anyway, you couldn't overlook where they were dropping the ball, and I think we would have rather had smaller, more conventional 6-inch figures if it meant they could include the poorly missing signature weapons. The Lightning Collection would go on to swap over the issues, fixing the scale, moulding, accessories, civilian heads, while creating issues that Bandai often got right, like plastic quality and decal paint accuracy. But yeah, that's a story for another day. Oh, and speaking of sets that were abandoned without being completed, we have to talk about the Automorphins. They were a product line released right at the tail end of 2017 and were on shelves throughout Bandai's final licensee year of 2018, marking of course the 25th anniversary of the series and effectively their toy line. Bandai had recreated their original Automorphins at 5 times the price no less. The Automorphins lent into the early days of the Legacy line, mimicking the original boxes and even taking it to its extreme by recreating the toys and packaging almost exactly. The only differences were a few modern updates and typos to the box artwork, and the figures themselves, their civilian heads, had had rotation added for some reason. They excitably revealed the initial wave of red, green and pink, while soon showing off the next one of blue, black and yellow at a toy fair in Europe, Germany I believe. It was ironic that Europe had got the push when the UK wasn't even given the release of pink, just red and green, and by the time America copped the second wave, yellow had been nixed in favour of yet more greens. I guess it makes sense in sales terms, but man did it buy in collecting terms. This should have been an opportunity for people who had missed out on or long since destroyed or wore out their originals. And here was Bandai partially promising something and then making a harsh U-turn business decision to the detriment of collectors that they wouldn't ever have done in the past. It was so strange. Obviously Bandai had someone in a high position of control who was deciding to scale back on the female figures as much as possible. The Legacy line had been getting weird treatment of the girls too. Obviously the Zeo pair became the GameStop exclusives, as did Dino Thunder Yellow. That was the only way you could complete those teams, through one random retail chain in the USA. If you couldn't make it to one of those stores or had a US shipping address, you had to rely on the kindness or savageness of the eBay aftermarket to get sorted. It was kind of bittersweet that Bandai's run concluded with reproductions of some of their most iconic figures on the shelves of, I guess, wherever you could still find them. I like to think Trini would have been released had Toysrus stayed open, or if Bandai had kept hold of the toy license. Sadly, neither was to be, so while Legacy could get you most of the way there, if you still want to complete a mint condition team of Automorphins, yeah, break out every credit card and financial asset at your disposal, because they don't come around often, and when they do, a lot of people want them for a lot of money. If you're getting it by now, Bandai were all over the place in this final part of the line. They had so many incomplete lines that it was a bad time to get involved with the brand. From movie morphers to legacy Zords to legacy helmets in both scales to legacy figures and Automorphins, it was frustrating and really was the writing on the wall for what was happening. It was still shocking though, as we'd not known the franchise without Bandai. The first years of the Legacy line had given us banger after banger of must-have items ripped right out of our nostalgic 90s hearts. But as it went on, it's almost like they became cynical about what to sell, or more focused on the bottom line than taking risks. Which, you know, business and all, it kind of makes sense. But it was also a hard pill to swallow after they had impressed us so much at first, to only then be giving us phoned-in, half-baked ideas, still wearing the name of the line that had originally stood to represent something so much greater. There were definitely sparks within the end of the line, the gold Zeo staff, the 2017 movie power coins, even doing the Green Ranger helmet and Ninja power coins for the first time. A few things got out that were impressive, even at a time when the overall quality of the line was decreasing. Though largely unseen without the physical space of Toysrus, they would repeat production of pretty much the entire line with re-releases for the last few months of the year through sites like Big Bad Toy Store, giving fans a final chance to buy what they hadn't already. The worst kind of ending is often the one you weren't expecting or didn't know was coming, and unfortunately that's exactly what happened with the end of the Power Rangers Legacy line. Mimicking what was going on with the main line for Ninja Steel and Super Ninja Steel, there were unfortunately lots of experimental, often cheaply produced categories that ultimately ended up incomplete. The strange thing is Bandai pivoted for what was financially stable for them, and ironically, though this was the end of the Legacy line, it's also the closest to what the Lightning collection would become. Everything became either an action figure or occasionally some large roleplay item. They cancelled things they deemed risky like the Super Zeo gems, yet another casualty of losing the licensing, cutting their losses and retracting on planned items. What was so frustrating about the end of Legacy was that they were still giving us many long requested items, like the Psychos, the Ninetti coins, the Automorphin re-releases, the Power Sword. The problem was they were slipping and their discrepancy issues were becoming more glaring. For Bandai, they had gone from doing one decent Power Rangers toy line that took their focus to three, and not very well. By the end, nothing was hitting. You had a film that flopped, a series toy line that had already underperformed in Japan, and now they were shifting focus in the collector's line onto these quick buck items. The heart and soul of the line had largely gone, seemingly accompanying Greg out the door. Perhaps he saw it coming, perhaps a lot of it came from him and people like him. Something changed culturally within Bandai that could be felt as a fan. It wasn't completely terrible. There were still a few standout items for sure, but there was a much higher proportion of what the hell is this than we'd been used to from all sides of the Power Rangers toy line. I think they knew they were being looked at for replacement, and as a result played it really safe, but in turn they annoyed the people they were trying to sell to. It's a difficult balance. What's the impact then of Power Rangers Legacy? When Power Rangers Legacy began, with the humble Power Morpher and Megazord, there's no way Bandai could have envisioned it becoming as expansive and extensive as it did. Yes, as fans, we always wanted more than they gave us. But what I hope these three videos have shown is that Bandai generally had a great frequency of releases, ensuring the line always had momentum, but releasing things sensibly enough for us to keep up with the pace. It was not cheap for the most part, but it was good value for what we were getting. Truly one-of-a-kind pieces that could not exist in any other form. Who could forget Bandai Japan cribbing off America's Dragon Dagger and Morpher designs for their own Zyuranger releases, and Titanus was copied pretty much 90% of the way for the Soul of Jigoken series conclusion. You don't get Japan reusing your designs unless you're doing something right. Bandai managed to put out 5 almost complete Mighty Morphin teams of figures in 5 years. They did the initial 5-inch series and then movie lines, they did the 6-inch Legacy regular and the metallic colour variant lines, and of course the Season 1 Automorphins re-releases, minus yellow. Mighty Morphin was truly the through line of the line, even when there were efforts to evolve away from it, like the 2017 movie or the Zeo items. I also think it's crazy how this third phase of Legacy line is most similar to what the Lightning collection became. Features like matching Power Rangers branded boxes with miniaturized season logos. When Saban redesigned the logo for 2019, it kept that idea, bringing back the Mighty Morphin Lightning Bolt and just making the series subtitle a separate element. An abundance and emphasis on figures and a sidelining of Zords. New ambitious roleplay. things we'd never had before. Bandai effectively gave Hasbro the playbook on how best to continue. Hasbro of course had selective hearing about quality of materials and manufacturing, but again, another story, one for another time. To their immense credit, Bandai were the first to try and do it right. Power Rangers stuff that was not for kids, for adults who always wanted versions closer to what we saw in the show. When the chips are in, Power Rangers Legacy was overall the single best line of toys for adult collectors. The fact that we're still talking fondly about it should be testament to that. And in case I've never said it before, thank you, Bandai America. You did good. So guys, that is it, the end of my Legacy line retrospective trilogy. Given these insane runtimes, I feel like this could have been many more parts, but I like the idea of wrapping it up into 3 distinct phases so we could understand it better, so I hope that's worked for you guys too. An extra benefit for my Viewing Globe Patreons, check out my ranking rundown on the Legacy line and what my overall favourite products are from that toy line. Quite a fun thing to put together after all of this. And if you've been checking in the comments with your own Legacy stories, let me know your thoughts on the final phase of the line. And overall, did it take the sheen off everything? Do let me know. And thank you all of you for sticking with me into 20,000 subscribers. I would love a silver plaque one day, so please subscribe if you never have before. And that'll be it for this one. So until the next time, see you later.